used to be that all of the buildings had people in them at all times. And so if an area needed to be cleaned, it could be reported. Say, hey, this area, if there was a leak in the wall, it could be reported. Oh, hey, maintenance, I saw a leak in the wall. When we work with these organizations that have 20, 30, 40 buildings globally that had thousands of people in them 100% of the time, and now they have thousands of people in them 50% of the time. So being able to have these devices that say, hey, there's the CO2 levels in this area of the building that aren't used very often are too high. What's going on with our equipment that is causing that to happen right now? Or we're sensing water leakage in one way or another, and it could be a humidity increase. So if we're actually able to track that, facilities knows it, they can get to the problem before it causes a much bigger problem.
And with that too, it could be as simple as like, do the plants need to be watered, right? If we have less people in the office, we have all these nice plants, that's part of what makes the office environment nice. A sensor could be for just about anything, right? So when we talk IoT, there's sensors, you name it, there's probably a sensor for it. Whether we're in the office space, the manufacturing space, the hospitality space, there's sensors that could be used for anything. They're cheap to deploy. They have a long battery life. And again, they're meant to solve problems and make our life simpler. And using IoT and all this devices and all this data, back to the point earlier, should solve problems and make our lives better. And that's what we're seeing in deployment of these devices in conjunction with the maps that we produce.
Okay, so you guys mentioned asset tags a little bit earlier, and I was wondering if you could just dive a little more deep into that for me.
Oh gosh, you bet. I mean, Morgan, the conversations that we have, whereas occupancy sensors are a main topic of conversation, there's a really good possibility that asset tags trumps all of those other conversations. And there's just so many different use cases where we see, I don't know, Jeff, what do you say? Like, in healthcare, we hear this one a lot. And not to pitch the idea of the mapping solution too much, but being able to tie in, say, the location of the defibrillators in a hospital so that a doctor or nursing staff can find the defibrillator that's closest to them in case of an emergency, or knowing where all the wheelchairs are. Have we lost any out into the parking lot? Do we have what we need to serve the patients that are in our building? And can we use asset tags in such a way that we get access to what we need to enhance the patient outcome? So that's one vertical. We got into, was it a baseball team, Jeff? We got into one conversation where they wanted to have an asset tag on the mascot. The whole idea being is that the families could then see where the mascot was on the map and take their kids to go quickly take a selfie, to get a picture of the mascot. And that was like a big piece of their identity as a team was, hey, the mascot, everybody wants to get their picture with it. And so let's increase the family experience at the ballpark by giving them access to that mascot. We've had organizations that want to put asset tags on the trees and the portable trees, as it might be. They're in the large containers in the parking lots because their parking list was actually a venue, the convention center. Their parking lots, depending on the type of event that's being hosted there, actually changes how they're going to be parking, and so they need those moved around. They need to be able to visualize that because that's going to tie into their parking solution. So yeah, lots of fun things. I know that Jeff's got a couple of really good examples as well.
Yeah, in one company I worked for, I was in charge of calibrated equipment, and knowing where that equipment was painful because you have really smart engineers that like to move things to where they're working, and so I'd have very expensive equipment that needed to be calibrated. And I wish I would have had, some asset tags to tell me the location of where they're at, because then it would have made it so much easier going into every engineer's office. Hey, do you have the, machine I'm looking for? And, something even like, a small, maybe size of a computer would be something we would need to find. And if you know anything about engineers and manufacturing, is they like to keep their stuff to be theirs. So that always made for a good Easter egg hunt. But then, even like in the office, if we have a visitor and we have a large office and we want to put an asset tag around a visitor badge to know where that visitor is traveling, so they're not going the wrong direction, right? That's really helpful to know and then visualize that on a map, right? Charles is coming to visit my office. He checked in up front, but he made a wrong turn, and I'm going to laugh about it with him later. But I'll go intercept him before he, ends up locked out in the back lot, right? So there's some good use cases there, and despite it not being very common anymore, If we still moved AV carts all over the place, right? That's maybe a classic example from times before we had TVs in every conference room, and some places may still do that. But knowing where these things that we paid money for, that we really have limited resources, and we don't want to buy one for everyone for those shared things, is good to know. I heard recently that airports are thinking about putting asset tags on the wheelchairs so they know where they're at. So there's not too many, in one terminal and not enough in another, just to have that visibility to make sure that they're getting people off the plane in a timely manner, and they're not sitting around waiting for that. So there's a lot of use cases where knowing the current position of something that moves is really helpful to save us time, effort, and energy.
That's great. I mean, you guys just talked about so many great use cases. It seems like the possibilities are endless. And I know you also mentioned there's a ton of different types of sensors. Do you ever see challenges with customers around like which sensors to pick, how to, marry that data together?
Oh yeah, and especially it depends on what type of customer it might be. One of the biggest challenges in the smart buildings world that I see would be, say, multi-tenant buildings. Each tenant may have their own devices that they want to be using. They have to be tied to a back-end system in one way or another. That has to be tied into the main back-end system of the building operation itself. And, so yes, being able to first, how do I consolidate and use the same type of sensor through a multi-tenant building where I do have tenants that have agreements with all sorts of sensor companies out there. So that's a challenge for, say, the multi-tenant building operator itself. But even just from an individual organization, you've got different departments who are working in different silos. So they have the challenge where maybe security went through maybe with security went to RFP and then went through the procurement process with a particular sensor vendor. And then facilities management is now trying to solve for a different problem, and they end up contracting with a different sensor vendor. So yes, breaking down silos and making sure that everybody is using consistent sensors is a challenge. But then also, just to the point of the question, like, how do I know for sure that this is the sensor that's going to last the longest that I need it to, provided do I have the bandwidth to even power the data that I'm getting out of the sensor? So do I have to look at other hardware within my building to make sure that I've got the ecosystem to even get the data from the sensor? Is it the most cost-effective sensor? Am I global? Are there restrictions from the sensor vendor globally where they can and can't operate? So just a handful of challenges that we've come across.
Yeah, and with anything, technology is always changing. There's always going to be a better solution for IoT devices and sensors. The big thing that I think makes it easy to get them on a map here at MapsPeople is that we're agnostic to sensors, as long as they have an API or some other ways that we could get that data out of the sensor. We could work with those protocols. So it does make it nice to be one of the tools that could be used to bring a lot of different IoT data into one place and kind of look at it from one pane of glass. Because if that didn't exist, a lot of systems would be disparate, and you'd have a one login, one screen for one set of data, one login, one screen for another set of data. And it'd be difficult to gain all the insights that you need to solve a problem. A good example is you look at occupancy of a room and you see that you have 2 conference rooms that never get booked despite them being in a good place. You don't know why, right? Well, then you log into another system and you see temperature and humidity of those rooms. And you're like, okay, I have 2 rooms that are hotter or colder, right? You might be able to make the conclusion as to why that's happening. But if you're looking at that data together in the right context and you're creating a heat map and you're color coding it, you could gain a lot more understanding that the rooms aren't occupied because they're too hot. And the people that do like to go there are the ones that are always wearing, jackets in the middle of summer because they're too cold, right? So maybe that's the room for them, or they have hot yoga in that room. I don't know, right? So like the more data we could show in one place, the more relationships we could form by looking at data, the more insights we could gain, and the better we could solve a problem and make the workspace better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know I'm always cold in the office, so I'm always looking for that warmer room. But yeah, I think you guys shared a ton of great information about IoT and smart buildings. So I thank you guys for joining me today.